Okay, guys, we're going to spend a little bit of time learning about some fundamentals related to effective feedback. We're going to start with probably something that might be surprising. Uh, Educational research has shown that feedback is actually one of the things that can have the greatest impact on student learning, but that we need to be very careful about the kind of feedback we provide, when we provide it, and how we help students learn how to use it, because lots of negative things can also happen as a result of providing our students with feedback, as this quote here suggests. So if we take a quick look at this chart, as Dr. Williams suggests, there's 8 different things typically that can happen with feedback. Only 2 are positive, and these are the 2 we want to aim for: having students increase their efforts or increase their aspirations. So to do that, we need to provide the right kind of feedback at the right time in the right way. So what exactly does that mean, and what does that look like? Well, take a step back for a minute, and it might be helpful to think about video games and how video games give feedback in such a way that students or the player is motivated to keep going. That's what we would hope to do with our feedback. So what exactly does that mean? If you think about in a video game, you're assessed at every single moment. So let's take a minute and read this quote from James G. Typically, when our students play games and they fail, they use the information that they gained from their quote-unquote failure to try again and move forward. And that's the kind of attitude or mindset we want to have in our classroom when it comes to feedback. So what exactly are the elements of effective feedback? Well, here this visual is meant to represent for you what we need to think about. So obviously we're going to have a clear specific goal so the kids know what they're shooting for. So if we were playing a video game, it might be to kill all the zombies. Whatever it is, they know what they're supposed to be doing. The thing that makes feedback in a video game super important is that it's quickly and easily accessible, and right away students can use it to improve their playing, right? So it's timely, it's user-friendly, it's immediately actionable, and it's tangible, it's transparent, it's ready to rock. You can do it now. The other thing that makes it super helpful, and why it's something that motivates them to keep playing, is that it's constant and it's consistent. So we want to think about that when we're providing feedback for our students. There's 3 ways to think about providing effective feedback to our students. And what we want to do each time is to tell them what was done well, what needs improvement, or how it can be improved. So think of that as the 3-pronged approach. And hopefully that'll be something you'll be able to implement this upcoming fall in your own classroom. And I know you're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, Rydell, really? Who has time to provide all this feedback? I have 100+ students. It's true. Feedback, good feedback, takes time to provide for your students. But you don't have to provide feedback on everything all the time. What we need to do in our own disciplines is think about the differences between a mistake and an error. So just take a minute and think about that in your own discipline. Try to think of one example in your content area. When is something just a mistake, and when is something is a fundamentally an error that inhibits somebody from continuing on? So what we want to do when we're thinking about providing feedback is to focus on the errors and not so much on the mistakes. I know this is going to put the language arts people over the edge, but if I was grading my students' essays in social studies and there were some spelling mistakes, I might circle them and highlight them, but I'm not going to write feedback on them, because what I'm more concerned about is if their ability to construct an argument using sound evidence. That would be where I would look for procedural errors or misconception errors that I would want to give them feedback on. So what we want to do is focus on those larger sort of patterns that disrupt, or if you will, inhibit students learning in our disciplines, rather than every little mistake that they make. And so you don't have to provide feedback on everything, but you want to do it on the big things, the things that are going to be consistent across a whole entire course. And then what we should be able to do, or hopefully what we do, is be able to see patterns from the feedback we provide for students, and when it comes to those important errors in our own disciplines. So here I just tried to give you an example. If for the skills that my students would need to read and analyze a primary source, you see them here in the left column. Like sometimes they might make an error with determining who wrote the source and what the audience was and when it was. They might make an error when it comes to determining sort of what was the historical context within which the source or product was created, and they may make errors when it comes to drawing conclusions from what they've read. So I've got my three sort of major ways that people have a hard time analyzing primary sources. And as I read across my students' work, I just simply jot down their initials if that's an area that they struggled with. Then you can start to see across periods where students are having the most errors, and you can focus your reteaching on those. So that's a brief introduction to feedback, how we need to think about it to make it effective, and also the ways in which you can make providing feedback for students more manageable by focusing on big errors and every single mistake. So what you're going to do now is read a couple of articles about providing effective feedback, and then create a concept map that sort of summarizes, if you will, all the elements of effective feedback.